What's accountability do? It shapes our character. And God will bring us into accountability also. We're in a society today where we're taught that nobody ought to be in charge. Everybody does his own thing. I've been teaching on humanism on Wednesday night, and that's basically do your own thing type philosophy. In John chapter 6, verse 66 through 69, it says, "From this time on, many of his brethren turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you?" He asked the 12. And Simon answered and said, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We believe and know that you're the Holy One of God." Even his own disciples, he asked that too. Are you going to leave too? These are hard sayings. Many of the people said, it's too hard. Many of them said it's too demanding. Much of our congregations might say it's too boring. We're going somewhere else where we can be entertained a little bit better. And I'm out of here. Well, Paul not only dealt with the divisive persons, the deserting persons, but he also dealt with the defaming people. I think the first two are easier to handle than the third one, defaming people, those who are speaking against you and not always telling the truth. If I ask for a show of hands, how many of you have ever had someone tell a lie about you? Most all of us would have a hand come up. And that hurts when you have that. In 2 Timothy 4:14, he says, "Alexander, the metal worker, did me a great deal of harm. The Lord will repay him for what he has done." He basically saying, Alexander put the word out on me. He lied and he told stories on me. 1 Timothy 1:20 says, "Among them are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan to be taught not to blaspheme." That's a strong statement, you know. When you pray, Lord, let Satan work on this person, that he might know who you are. I wouldn't want anybody praying that for me, and their prayers be answered. Paul warns Timothy in verse 15 to be on the guard for this guy. Sometimes we get members who move from church to church, and sometimes the church they come from will call our pastor and say, "You might want to watch this person. They've been known to do this, that, or the other." That seldom happens anymore, but that used to be a fairly regular thing. And we would get a church letter, you know, when you would go to another church, you would ask for a church letter from our church. On that church letter, it would ask, are these people in good standing? And sometimes the pastor would be honest and true and say, no, they're not. They're gossipers. They're slanderers. They're not faithful. That's an exciting day when you get a member like that in your church, you know. I mean, you just want everybody to stand up in unison saying, I'm for them, you know. We don't do that much anymore. Paul also worked with devoted people. That's the person that you really want to be tuned into. That's the person who keeps our pastor going on a daily basis, is those devoted people. It gives him encouragement that things can get done. It takes a lot of people to do the ministry of this church. And many of you are devoted. We can count on you on any given day, any given time to be here. Whatever job you have, you do it, and you do it well. And those things are very encouraging to we as staff. 2 Timothy 4:11 says, only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in my ministry. You remember, this Mark is the Mark that Paul got mad at because Mark was a little young in the ministry and he decided he's going back home. Paul got mad at him. Get on out of here. Go on home, baby. You know. And Barnabas encouraged Mark, though. And you can see that it was effective because here Paul is toward the end of his ministry and he's saying, bring Mark with you. Want to see Mark. Want to see that transformation. Devoted people are not full of excuses. Mark was full of excuses. He wanted to go home. Maybe he's homesick, whatever. May have been afraid to be out in public with Paul. I don't know. But there's many excuses that we hear. I'm going to share just a few of them with you. Now, these are not necessarily church excuses. I got this off of the computer somebody sent me one time, but there's some funny ones in here. Says, first excuse says, my parrot spoke for the first time and I had to wait for him to do it again so I could tape it. You know, that's a pretty good excuse. I lost my American Express card and I can't leave home without it. I got stuck in the blood pressure machine down at Walmart. This is a pretty good one. If you know your drugs, you'll like this one even better. It says, when I got up this morning, I took 2 X-Lax along with my Prozac. Now I can't leave the bathroom, but at least I feel good about it, you know. Ah, boy. The nominating team, and I've heard about every excuse you can imagine, I think. How many of you have ever been on a nominating committee? Oh, it's an exciting committee. It's a good committee. It used to be a lot of work, but it's not that much work anymore, and not here anyway. Few months back, Richard Tuttle spoke in one of our services, and he used the term, I could wring your neck. My mom used to use that term every now and then. I could just wring your neck. You know, I don't know where that came from, but I think it came from killing a chicken. When I was a little boy, you know, we killed a chicken. Mom said, go out there and catch me a hen. And I had a dog, and I'd just chunk a rock at the hen that I wanted, and he'd get it. And I'd grab that old hen, bring it back to Mom. Mom grabbed it by the head and whirl that thing around and pop it, and off the head would come. That chicken would flop around there for a little while. And one time I was about probably 7 or 8, and I said, let me do that. I got that old hen by the neck, and I was swinging her. Her neck was growing. And finally, Mom had mercy on the chicken and said, let me do that. That poor old hen died a long time before her head came off. But sometimes I feel like wringing people's neck. You know, literally. I'd just like to practice stretching it out there long before I popped it, you know. And especially when I hear, I've done my turn. If you've ever said that to me, I could wring your neck. You want to set me off, just tell me, well, I've done my turn. Let me tell you, as long as God's given you breath and ability to get around and do things, you're not through doing your turn, because he still has things for you to do. Now, there may be things in the church you can't do. You know, if I call you and you're 80 years old and ask you to get on building grounds and work on building grounds, and I put you up on a roof shingling, that may not be the right job for you. But there's other jobs that you can do, and I would just appreciate if you'd never tell me I've done my turn, because it does set me off, and I may grab you by the neck one day and take a swing at that. Sometimes we hear the excuse, well, I need to pray about that. Now, we Baptists are bad about that's a put-off a lot of times. And Brother Charles Neal, are you in this service? I'll tell on Charles then. I first came to this church. I hadn't been here very long. I knew Charles, but I didn't know him well. I didn't know if he could take a joke or not. And I'd called him one night about serving on something. I don't remember what it was. He said, well, I'll have to pray about that. And I said, all right, I'll wait. And Charles got real quiet. I said, you do have a prayer life, don't you? He said, well, I meant that I would like to pray about it, and give some thought to it. But we've had a good joke out of that over the years, and Charles laughs about it, and I tell on him all the time for that. Some of the folks who work alongside with the staff here at this church have taken a gifts test. And there's about 8 service gifts that really help a church to function and to do things the way it ought to do and to run more smoothly. And I hope that you have taken that test. Many of our congregation have taken that test. When the nominating committee comes together, we use whatever your primary and secondary gift is to try to place you in the right spot. If I'm looking for someone who's going to be doing a hands-on work type project, I'm going to be looking for a person who has a server gift, because serving gift people like to work with their hands. So when we administer those tests, we record them, and we can draw them up on the computer, and we know who would be best fitted probably for many jobs that we have. Some of those service